Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Northshire Presents. Thank you all so much for being here with us this evening. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Rachel Person. I'm the event manager for Northshire Bookstore in Saratoga Springs, New York. Here, as I so often am these days, with my good friend and colleague, David Wood, who is going to be introducing our authors in just a moment. Before we get started with tonight's poetry reading, though, a couple of very quick notes. First of all, at any point in the evening, you can use the chat to compliment the wonderful things you're hearing, and you can also use the Q&A box that you'll find at the bottom of your screen to pose any questions that you have. We'll have time for some audience questions at the end of the evening, and David and I will save those up and pose them for you a little bit later on. So make liberal use of those. And then last of all, before we get started, a note of thanks. It's never the easiest business, indie bookselling, and the last couple of years have been pretty rough, but we've made it through these times thanks to the incredible loyalty and support of customers like you. We couldn't do it without you. We couldn't present events like tonight's without you, so we're deeply grateful that you're here, and we're deeply grateful for your continued support. So thank you very, very much. And David, why don't you take it away and introduce our poets this evening?
Thank you so much, Rachel. I realized this morning this is our third annual virtual poetry group reading since the pandemic started, and they really created sort of a nice virtual space for poetry during the cruelest month. Well, tonight it is my great pleasure to introduce three poets to you tonight. First off will be Sarah Alcott Anderson with her book, We Hold On to What We Can. She holds a BA from Skidmore and an MFA from Wilson College. Her poems have appeared in North American Review, Boston Review, December Magazine, and other journals. Her new book, the Boston Globe has said in her wise and elegant debut collection, We Hold On to What We Can, Sarah Alcott Anderson reminds us of the simple rhythms and the ripples that move backward and forward across time, touching us in the right now. Second up, Joan Kwon Glass will read from Night Swim, which won the 2021 Diode Poetry Prize. She's the author of the chapbooks How to Make Pancakes for a Dead Boy and If Rust Can Grow on the Moon. She's a graduate of Smith and serves as poet laureate for the city of Milford, Connecticut. Early reviewers have said that Night Swim takes us to the strange and terrible country of loss, and that it is equal parts crushing and healing. And then we will hear from Susan Comninos, the author of Out of Nowhere. Her work has appeared in the Harvard Review Online, Rattle the Common, Prairie Schooner, among others. She's a freelance arts and culture journalist, and she and her husband, her work has appeared in the Atlantic Online, Boston Globe, Chicago Tribune, Christian Science Monitor, and Jewish Daily Forward. Reviewers have said that there is such a fierce and tender ache in Out of Nowhere. It's an ache that you'll recognize even as you find yourself astonished by the way she's able to make it new. She dazzles us with what we already know as if we're discovering it for the first time. Please join me in welcoming to Northshire, Sarah Alcott Anderson, Joan Kwon Glass, and Susan Comninos. Sarah, please take it away.
Thank you. It's such an honor to be here. I just want to say thank you so much to Northshire Bookstore. And I'm so honored to read with these two poets, Susan and Joan. And thank you all, whoever is out there listening. I'm just going to jump right in, and I'm going to start with a poem called Caught. I am about to tell you something I hope you will not forget. When you were 4, I built this swing for you. I left the gate to the pasture open when you were 7. I rebuilt the gate, urged the sheep back into the field. Now you are 9. I tried, but couldn't secure the latch tonight. Animals died. You and your sister slept, your dreams incapable of knowing the way a coyote can leave a sheep in its wake. I keep seeing them out there, in the dark, replaying the primal violence, the twisting. Earlier, I carried each of you up steep farmhouse steps, your limbs and eyelids heavy. Sleepily, you recalled an evening last summer when we lit and lofted paper lanterns above the field where I know wild dogs with bloodied lips left their prey tonight. And the second poem I'm going to read is called Scarlet Tanagers. Scarlet tanagers and warblers fly mostly at night. Some migratory birds cover 9,000 miles to nest along the coast just to find their mate. And look at us. That winter, those years ago, the delivery was stuck in a storm. A large truck, snow, a driver shivering. With our love, a package of cracked wire coating, revealing the raw, the irreversible. Oh, but it is reversible. We have proven this. The way my heart jumps and proves I'm alive. In dreams that I don't mean to have, I prove it again. I put on my black velour coat. We're going out tonight. Yes, let's go out. Those birds make our yard their wintering ground. Let's let them and leave them there on the quiet, snowy branch. The freshness of the young couple by the pond last summer. Her hot pink bikini, the line of his hip bone sloping. Oh, that is us. Look at us. Sort of jumping around in my book from section to section. The first section is poems sort of about childhood, and then it transitions into actually more tornado poems. I have a few tornado poems. And this poem is based on an experience I had as a child in Connecticut. And it's written, I explain this here, but the first part is written sort of as if it was my mother's voice. It's called One Last Look at the Cathedral Pines. My mother's voice before the tornado. I need you to do exactly what I say. Take your seatbelts off, get on the floor in front of your seat. Hold your head over your knees. We're going to be fine. Stay there. Don't look up. I'll tell you when it's okay. I always brought my girls with me on photo shoots. This time, I thought we would beat the storm. I asked for a different lens, the camera bag hanging from one of their small shoulders. I yelled at my little girls, get away from the fence, get inside the station wagon, go, I'm coming. Get in the car, girls, close the door. A different perspective. We are 42 acres. We are old growth white pine. We are hemlock. We are centuries. We were purchased in 1883 to prevent logging. The tornado of 1989 destroyed us. We became a study site for ecological restoration. We protected you all those years. West Cornwall, Connecticut, the back seat. I remember thinking those trees went on and up forever and that they didn't have tops. I remember us in your dad's 47 baby blue Citroen convertible on our way to the Village Memorial Day parade, our hair wild around us, or at night on the way to your house for dinner, headlights and forest. I was born during a thunderstorm. When I learned that tornadoes are born in thunderstorms, it all made sense. The spinning, swirling air of my life made sense. The rain stops, white church, open stretch of road. Here's a poem called Point of Reference. Rattling all the way down Route 7, you drove that stone blue station wagon into the ground. You said, let's meet between I have no choice and I'll stay here with you for a little while. We looked at letters cast in lead, trays and trays, pretended that was our life. I said I felt like a botanist who has grown tired of naming ferns. I told you my attic smells of old papers, guidebooks to North American plants, their sweetening petals. You told me to sit down, to be the one whose plants grow radiant as ghosts in the sharpening dark, to see their gorgeous sprouting up. You said, change your point of reference, your cast of ghosts. And I said, let's pray for Jessie, who was shy, so I played with her in the sandbox. Pray for the man who loves his cut timber more than his wife. And pray for the woman who has not yet been kissed on a thunderstorm summer porch. This poem, I'm reading, I guess I'm focusing a lot on the childhood poems tonight. This one is called It's About Time. It's about time. It's always about time. Strings of little lights and paper lanterns, the shimmering city over there, the sirens over there, all those lives in all those windows. We have to say this headlong into the night. Here is what we say. Then she kissed me in the middle of my back. Why didn't you call instead of getting in the pickup in the storm? And then he left, really left. I still don't know, a train, I think. She put her hand on top of my head, kissed my temple. Why did it take us this long? My children have filled me, they have filled me. I should have called you. I should have told you what a poet once told me, that it takes half a century to figure out who they are, our real true loves. Kings and queens at banquets, at dances do this, in unlit places. There's a word that means homesickness for a home that never existed. But I remember every room in your home. We burn into each other. Syllable, driftwood, beach fire, forest. We throw it all on. We talk until our voices scratch the worn wooden table, until the ocean in our story is far away. Girls racing headlong toward the magic and the hurt. No one could have stopped us. We had salt in our hair, and we were fast. And I'm going to finish with this poem. This is actually the final poem in my collection. It's the final poem, and it's also the poem I wrote closest to when I decided the book was finished. So I guess I wrote the poem and then decided it was finished. Free advice. If you mistake the taillights for an idling van, I'm sorry, let's start over. If you mistake the taillights of an idling van for the window glow of a hostel, wait for the traffic signal to change. Watch the red reflecting off wet road. Let the tires disappear over the hill. Keep walking. If you need a place to stay tonight, this might just be the wrong town, wrong time. If you believe I don't remember your face, I'll tell you now, I would know it in the dark. Maybe I'll meet you in the dark, but you have to keep walking for now. Think of the gestures we all misread. Slough them off. Step over them. Keep going. Thank you.
Next up will be Joan Kwon Glass. Why don't you share some of your poems with us?
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, David. My name is Joan Kwon Glass, and I'm reading to you from Connecticut. This is my book called Night Swim, which won the 2021 Diode Editions book contest. And before I read poems from this book, I just wanted to let everyone know that the content of the book is very difficult. In 2017, I lost my 11-year-old nephew to suicide. And 2 months after he died, my sister, who was his mother, also took her life. And so I spent the next 3 years writing. Actually, it took me about a year to write at all. But the last 3 years writing, and the result was Night Swim. The first poem I'm going to read is called Cartouche, and it's about the process of, I have several poems in this book about this, the process of removing things and how do you choose what to let go of and how do you choose what to keep after someone dies. Cartouche. When you died, Mom insisted we remove every photo from the walls. Not just the ones with you in them, but also of me and my children and your children. Next, she invited friends to take your belongings, a new set of dishes, your perfume, a book you inscribed in high school, the little A at the end of Julia, tender and intact. Ancient Egyptians believed that to cross over into the land of two fields, your heart must be light as a feather and your name cast onto stone, for this means you are loved. I practice writing your name, leaving it anywhere that feels permanent. I press your handwriting into papyrus wings. Mom motions toward me with outstretched hands, offering up a handful of your jewelry, as if to say, take these before they break or are stolen from us. Hold them in your hands. Pretend that something, anything other than her absence can endure. The next poem is called Elegy for My Sister's Journal. And this poem is about the fact that I waited almost 4 years to open the box that the police gave me. So crime scene evidence, police reports, as well as my sister's journal. And it's about why I waited. Elegy from my sister's journal. When the policeman handed me your journal in the evidence bag, I left it there unread, claiming some small victory and refusing your final words. And when the psychic at a party claimed to have a message for me from you, I shook my head and said, no, thank you. A year after your death, I awoke to your fist, urgent, banging against my bedroom door. I could have opened it, could have given you the chance to unburden yourself. Maybe after I listened, you would finally have left me alone. The truth is, all of this could just be my strange way of taking a stand. My sister is gone, and no ghost can take her place. Can you see me here, writing this poem, brooding in our childhood bedroom? Stuffed animals smiling stupidly from the dresser. I'm staring unblinking at the scorched doors the way a child does when sulking. Keep your journal and your fist. Instead, give me the bag in which you took your last breath, the film that lifted away from your cheeks, cheeks I once compared to winter apples. Give me the last thing you laid eyes on, vase of fake flowers on the nightstand, your daughter's photo on your home screen, the window sealed shut from the inside. My mother is Korean and I'm half Korean and I speak Korean. So some of my poems have Korean language embedded in them. And this is about the different ways that we bury the dead in this country versus South Korea. And I just thought a lot about that, you know, how different it is and what I wished I had been able to do differently in this country. Chuseok. Today, my uncle and his wife will visit my grandparents' tomb in Korea the way they do every year. They will leave trays stacked high with persimmons and powdered tok, then say a Christian prayer as the wind stirs everything into wakefulness. On Chuseok, we remember the rise of the Silla, kingdom of gold crowns, with jade carved and dangling like grapes. We celebrate 3 centuries of unity, North and South, dead and living together. We salute the rising moon. I think of my nephew's grave in Troy, Michigan, 7,400 miles from my grandparents' tomb, his headstone flush to the ground. Every time it rains, the water floats trash down from the street nearby, a cigarette box, crumpled Burger King cups, plastic bags torn like the skin of ravaged prey. If I could go back, I would claim a summit and build him a tomb. I would set a crown upon his head. Every year I'd bring gifts and invite the wind into the tomb where his skeletal jaws hang wide open forever, trying to say that one last thing. This next poem is an epistolary poem. It's a letter to my sister. Dear sister, do you remember roller skating in the basement on snow days? We stumbled and soared as outside the tiny window, the Michigan sky confessed its sins. A basket turned over and shook, covering everything. Or how about that summer at Hanmani's house in Korea? We perched on the highest stair and swung our sandaled feet through the gap, nibbling jelly sandwiches with chopsticks and giggling at Harabuji's toupee. Remember how pissed you were the year I went to rehab? How after that you looked at me with uncertainty, like I was still your sister, but less? You probably don't remember the day we buried you, but man, was it a shit show. Missionaries sang all 5 stanzas of Jesus Loves Me. People kept asking me how you did it. I held your friend's Xanax so she wouldn't take too much. An addict holding pills for mourners. Hilarious, right? All I wanted to do was make bad jokes, but you were the only one who would have laughed at them. What no one tells you about losing your sister, about losing her to suicide, is that in one crushing hour, your childhood becomes a moonless well. You try to pull the bucket back up and remember the good times, but since your death, the good times feel just like the bad times. Do you remember how hard it rained at your funeral? How your friend Liz sang after we'd lowered you into the ground? On rainy days, I still hear that song. Are you still there in the basement where we skated? So fast that after a while, all we recognized through the spinning was each other. Do you remember your last breath? Did you feel me take it with you? If I lowered the bucket and sent down my lungs, would you gasp with relief and tug on the line? The next poem is called What I Regret. And I grew up in Michigan, and we would go back every summer with my children and see my sister and my mother and my nephew. And this is about remembering that time. What I regret. Every summer we spent a week at the lake. You and your cousins caught turtles and minnows before dinner, and they squatted enraptured over the creatures you'd found. They stroked the turtles' backs, picked them up when they wandered too far. When they stuck their whole hands in the bucket, giggling as the fish flurried through their fingers, you turned to me and said quietly, maybe we should set them free. On movie nights, you held a bag of M&Ms open on your lap and waited as your cousins took forever to get settled. They bickered about which pillow they needed, what spot on the couch they'd claimed, who had a bigger scoop of ice cream in their bowl, how it wasn't fair and could they have more, You never asked for more of anything, not even when your life depended on it. I should have filled your arms with a blooming bushel of your favorite candy, found you a spot close to me on the couch, and asked you what movie made you the happiest. I should have summoned 1,000 turtles just so you could let them go. That last Christmas of your life, all I gave you was an Amazon gift card. I should have asked, what do you dream of holding? Before it's too late, tell me what your heart wants. Okay, this is the last poem, and it's called The Worst Thing. This poem takes place in the same mall, but several years apart. And it's about what the worst thing for me is about loss. The worst thing. When I think of grief, I remember the time I ran into Mrs. Arabeau outside Somerset Mall. 2 years after her daughter, my friend Dolores, died of ovarian cancer. I was carrying bags out when I saw her standing next to the revolving doors, smoking a cigarette, watching the cars turn from the parking lot onto the highway as the sun began to set. She didn't see me, and I should have kept walking. If I had understood then what I understand now about grief, I would have left her alone, in peace with her view of the fading light. But since I knew nothing yet, I touched her arm, smiled gently. Hello. She blinked. Her shoulders fell forward and her face suddenly became a torn page, crumpled and aged. I'm sorry, she cried and ran back into the mall. Her cigarette dropped on the ground, gave off what heat it still had, then nothing. It's 5 years later. I'm with my sister at the same mall, and we're here because my sister wants to buy her son's favorite candy to put in his casket with him. Haribo raspberries, the kind that look like real raspberries and are almost too sweet. The nightmare of his death is bramble bright. We are 2 women walking in a shopping mall, buying candy for a dead boy. Today, the crime scene company will scrub his blood from the hardwood floors, and at his funeral tomorrow, we will tuck the candy into his hand, which feels like a hardening clay version of his hand, and I will spend 6 hours hugging his classmates and their parents. Most, if not all of them, will become taller, older versions of themselves, while my nephew will forever be 11 with an exit wound above his left temple. My 16-year-old son says, the worst thing about loss is what you no longer hear. Sounds that have become familiar, gone. Coffee grinding in the morning, gone. Dogs whining at the door, gone. CBS News on TV in the morning, gone. Their laughter, gone. No, he was wrong. What I know now, and what I wish I had known the day I ran into Mrs. Arabeau at Somerset Mall all those years ago, is that what is worse than silence, what is worse than their absence, is that the world is so very full of everyone else. I want to go back to the revolving door, wave the living through as she smokes until every last one has passed. Then, when it's finally dark, tell her it's okay. Go now. The coast is clear. Thank you all for listening.
Wow, thank you so much, Joan. Next up, Susan, would you please read to us? Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank both Joan and Sarah for their fine and heartfelt poems. And at this point, I feel a little guilty about reading something that is lighthearted. But I just want to say that I honor both of your work, your contributions, and I will think about your poems after this event concludes, and I'm sure for some time after that. Okay, so I was struck by how many of the poems in my book Out of Nowhere actually come from news stories. And I guess that's not so surprising because I do write freelance arts and culture journalism. So a number of these poems are derived from news headlines and news stories. And one of those stories was 4 years ago, in 2018, a group of French nudists decided that they wanted to be able to visit art museums in the raw. And so a museum called Palais de Tokyo hosted them for an evening. And I thought this was very funny. And I also thought the fact that they call themselves naturists is funny because it's just a euphemism for nudist, people who like to run around with their clothes off. Anyway, so the more I thought about the story, this group of nudists goes to an exhibit at the Palais de Tokyo, and they go in the evening. And the more I thought about the story, the funnier I thought it was to shift it to where maybe, in my imagination, the nudists went to the museum in the morning. Maybe they went during rush hour. Maybe they had to take mass transit. And then I thought, well, what if they, instead of going to the Palais de Tokyo, instead went to the Louvre, which I also imagine as being very, very formal and august. And anyway, so okay, without more preamble, this first poem of mine is called Naked Admission, a Fantasy, that the nudists who took a pre-dawn tour of Palais de Tokyo instead chose to visit the Louvre. I imagine the nudists rising early to eat cheese, drink cafe au lait before heading, all points checked with their enfleshed fraternité, their closest art-loving copain for the Louvre, to stare at torsos and busts laid in no-touch halls with conditioned air. They must first stop meeting au sous-sol, where walls sport blue veins found on Roquefort flights, each wedge as bottom-heavy as an Anjou pear. So launched like rafts, hosts of naturists ride, all limbs and padded seats on the metro, zipped in their maps of skin. Some hang from questionably cleaned poles. Others walk down the moist morning streets with unprotected backs and hair. It's a show of bodies, hydraulically graced by youth, and of others freed from the clothes that function like slings, sagging no more at their exclusion from sights like the Mona Lisa in pain, suffering her societal ache, tooth gripped by a tongue that will soon be unstrapped to lick a cut on the thumb or juice from the lips after eating. Our naked fellows, our coterie of curated core designed by DNA spread among the art. Then an homage to a wired tour guide, they clot in a clatch of courteous ears, worn above stirred then shrunken chests. Like iron lungs puffed with air, the nudists become so pure, like marbled installations rarely moved near statues poised in a Gallic light, unbleached by windows set too high to mar their original breathing portrait of skin. Okay, so in keeping with this about the news theme, I'm going to read a few more poems pegged to the news. And I think I'm going to read you a poem called Arctic Traveler. I'm sure everyone remembers a few years ago, before the pandemic, I keep feeling this need to say before the pandemic, when scientists followed a fox that had traveled by itself, an Arctic fox, from Norway to Canada. And there were different estimates of how far the fox had traveled, but eventually I think people settled on 2,700 miles. So this poem is for that fox, and it's addressed to the fox. This poem is called Arctic Traveler, for the fox that walked 2,700 miles across melting ice. Little fox, how long will you stay in my imagination, steadily, traipsing toward dawn? Put down your silvered coat and jaw, mind from your den in Norway. Lick your nailed paws. For millennia, you've been stored, my needle-nosed plier, among hammers of your Arctic home, antlered reindeer, clawed bears, and weaponized salmon, flung hard as peppered snow, made errant by dirt. But when ice warms, it reconstitutes in darts, as sharp as you, brave tooth. So what did you prize from home's belly when you left it for colder cold? Its myths of fish? What taste kept you slipping across continents, meted in miles, from your glossed caps in sunlight all summer to this Canadian post? Soldier, dodging an end to your epic among Swedes, Danes, and Finns, and their bête noire, the Russians. Unhook your red tongue, then wash till night turns you into a sickle, an almost closed O. Sleep in my stunned mind, softer than your body, bent on glaciered roads. So the audience doesn't know this, but we can't see you. I wish we could see and hear you, but we don't have that access. So just consider me verbally saluting you. Okay. This next poem is a local poem. For those of you who are joining us from the Albany, Saratoga area, you are local, and that's where I'm reading from, outside of Albany. And I'm often interested in sort of random things that happen, odd news stories. So this next poem is called Bear Spotted in Delmar. Again, it's taken from local news headlines. And I'm just going to find that in the book. Okay. I like stories about small towns. I love the short story writer Alice Munro, and I'm interested in the drama that can unfold even in small places. Bear Spotted in Delmar, headline from a small town newspaper. I imagine your breath smells, though I've never seen you close enough to sniff you or even wave to you from a window of a car, piloted by me or another daylight driver. Though once, long ago, at summer camp, I saw a horse wipe its dripping snot on a girl's sheer skirt. It was more of a slide than a swipe, but still, we shrieked. The girl never returned. She'd been dismissed for her behavior, a tale that went unshared with the bulk of us, left snorting at the hinted story. So why does your foray into town seem funnier than any news I've read today? You've emerged before in various guises. Suitor with an accent, a lost clown in Groucho Marx glasses, all through the state of banked hay and confusion that can mark a rural life. Pity the ripe bear, grabbing at loaves of stone-soft bread from the counter of growled hopes, at the scent of stale humor, thin mockery, and rank, timid despair. It will go hungry. Okay, maybe one more poem about the news, and then we'll move on. Okay. So a few years ago, there was a news story about a bunch of bees, not a bunch of bees, a huge number of bees being shipped up to Washington State. There's been a bee drought, a bee disappearance, and so these bees were being, trucked in like merchandise to kind of, I guess, do what they were going to do among the cherry trees, and things went awry. So this poem is called "Bees, You and a Bird Dream," a poem in collage. And the headline that I was working off of reads, "Overturned truck spills millions of bees on the highway." This is from Time magazine. It was the headline on hives bound for a farm in Washington State. Bees. They were brought in by truck to taste the salt air. Witless sommeliers, gunned by instinct, sip by stricken sip, they were bombed up the West Coast ocean. What's your riven call to ride? A cult-like moan, settle utopia, known for garage bands so loud. I don't like the sound, but I love the air crying in from the window. You. Once in sleep, your ear was a sunken bowl filled with stones I'd never see. Every breath, not a drum, but silent, brassy, unstrung, a solo of small instruments. When littleness matters, each sting makes some cracked, pebbled sense. Bird. This morning, a cardinal, his dark eyes matched by his harlequin mask, dropped like a beaked anvil at my feet. Dream. And those bees, benighted pilgrims, emptied as overturned bags in the street, their crawl like mosaic, a glass face beaten to a savage hole, then pricked like a fissured pane, still shut. Last night, your absence on the water was a swept black wing. Then I was a bird, wanted away and pecking out. Okay. I'm thinking about reneging on my promise not to read another news poem. but I'm not. I'm not going to renege. Okay. Because I like to imagine random and sometimes ridiculous things. At some point, I don't know why I started thinking about this, but I started thinking about cartoon characters and how they perpetually stay the same age. I'm not particularly interested in cartoons, but I became interested in this idea of what would happen if these cartoon characters had to grow up, and if they had to move along in life, get jobs, maybe get married, become a parent, raise a family, and how successfully would they do that? So I started thinking about the AI character Max Headroom. Anybody remember Max Headroom? If you came of age in the 1980s, you heard a lot from Max Headroom. He was a salesman for Coke, and he was superficial, self-referential, and very self-focused. So, okay, page 52, Max Headroom, and that will be my last poem. Okay. So this poem imagines if Max Headroom had to get older. Max Headroom in midlife drops doubtful advice on his son. Maybe there will be nothing left. Maybe there won't be. A tick feels more real than the body. The head looks more whole than the whole. Blank sheets of rain slick a torso of snow. Wet stitches the ground above ground. It's grand how music splayed in arcs, from cave to MP3 to, I don't know. I stopped caring with college. Time rolls in waves, soldiers of fortune, but distracted, furious with boredom. Attention's a lapse, it lacks focus. See how slowly the sun dials back its hot face at our frowns. Don't stop dissing puffs of clouds. Who are they to talk like ghosts of gassed up whimsy? The air is dozing, wake it. With a needled presence, your nattering voice. Unhook an earpiece. Throw me the tatters of your banter. Here is the here that you've longed for. Okay. So I think that that concludes it for me. And I turn it over to the moderator.
Thank you so much, Susan, and thank you so much, everyone. We received a question that was DM'd to me from an attendee asking each of you, can you tell us a little bit about your writing process for poetry?
Oh boy. Anybody else want to go first?
I can jump in. Our writing process, is that the question?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I think that mine, it varies, but one thing that I do, and I actually teach my students to do this, I teach middle and high school, is just to take the pressure off it being a poem. I start with just a free write, and I just write. I usually time myself, and I just get it out all out on the page. I'm not thinking poetry. I'm not thinking structure, grammar, spelling, any of those things. And then I actually let it sit, and then I go back to it, and I see if there's a line that I could salvage from it and use, and maybe there's a line or a phrase or a word or nothing. So that's one way. For me, it's rare that I just get an idea and sit down and write the whole poem, but that has happened, and I love when that happens. But I feel like it's happened like 3 times in my whole life. So my other process is that I revise, possibly too much. Sometimes I worry that I revise the poem until it's like not its authentic self anymore. So I'm sort of I don't, that's not a clear answer, but I feel like that's my process, is to start with a free write, pull from it, make a poem, and then revise it, sometimes for actually several years.
Well, a lot of times it's wanting to pull my hair out because I can't seem to write anything. In fact, that happened to me earlier today. I actually had some free time and I so desperately wanted to write, and just, it was like, blah, nothing was coming out the way I wanted to. So I closed my computer and I watched TV for a half an hour. I mean, sometimes your brain is just not in writer mode. In terms of getting inspiration for writing, I try to be like, I try to live mindfully in terms of paying attention to poetic moments that happen to me. Um, and something I'm practicing right now is, I'm also a middle school teacher. I'm a public middle school teacher, and you know, it's very structured. A school is an institution in terms of like, there are, you know, everything is on a schedule, and there are a lot of rules and policies, and it can get like, it can feel the same day after day. And so as part of like living mindfully, I'm forcing myself to not see school that way, by seeking out those poetic moments. And sometimes it's in memory, like I'm drawing on memory of students that I've had, or things that have happened in my 20 years of teaching. I'm working on a new book about schools and teaching. I also belong to a writing group that meets once a week, which I don't always get to depending on my schedule, but that's really helpful too. Sometimes just committing that hour with a small group of people can really be inspiring.
So it's interesting for me to hear about other people's writing process. I am not a disciplined writer in terms of sitting down every day and seeing what I can dredge up. I tend to write for a few reasons. One is, something will strike me as very funny, and I feel the need to make fun of it. So, you know, like with the nudists that, you know, felt that they had to go view this art exhibit, you know, in the raw, because they would perceive differently if they had their clothes off too. So, you know, I feel the need to kind of make a joke out of something. That's one reason why I write, or what spurs me to write. Another is that I love verse forms because they give me a way to organize material, or they give me a way to contain the uncontainable. And I'm always touting them to my students because I think they're very useful. When people begin writing, they typically only, or at least Americans, they typically only want to write free verse. And the rigors of formal poetry can actually be very useful when you have some raw material and you're looking for a way to shape it. It gives you some structure, it gives you a framework, it gives you a way to move forward. So I love trying out verse forms. And when I'm teaching verse form classes, I will do the assignments along with my students. And that has led to some of my most interesting to me work. Another way I start writing, or, you know, another aspect of my, you know, process is, a line will show up in my head, and I don't want to be precious about it. Donald Hall used to call that getting messages from the mothership, where it almost feels as though something's been delivered to you. It is not of you, it is not from you. And it feels like a challenge to sort of write my way forward or backward to figure out, what is this line and what does it mean? So I think my process is a combination of utter randomness and imposing restrictions on myself in order to come up with something surprising or new, or to try to. So that's my answer.
That is wonderful. Thank you all three so much for sharing your insights and sharing your work with us tonight. Unfortunately, that is all the time we have left. We are out of time, but it's been a real pleasure being with you tonight. Audience, thank you for tuning in. Thank you all for being here. You can order all 3 of the collections that you've heard books from tonight at northshire.com and check out the rest of our event lineup there. Thank you all so much and have a great night.
Northshire.
Thank you.
Thanks so much.